Here we go.
All right, we are live. And let's see here. Going live on Instagram now. We are now live on Instagram. I don't have the notification from Twitter yet, but let's see. We got Facebook.
Oh,
Doreen
there's
is here.
Doreen is here. I refuse to start until somebody is here, and usually it's Doreen. So
Yeah, I basically always. Let's
look
see.
at them come rolling in.
We have people on Instagram as well.
Well, splendid.
We got Wendy and Josh from Colorado Springs. Did you meet them on book tour, Marty?
It's a good chance. Trying to think of a Wendy. Somewhere in Colorado-ish, I met a Gwindy with a G. Maybe that was in Washington. Wendy and Josh. It's a good chance. I met a lot of people in Colorado. Those events were well attended. So let's see. What are we up to? We have our next Q&A that we are scheduled for June 22nd. That's a Monday night, everybody. That one's going to be with Reed Dent. So you can bring him all of the questions, Gospel of Being Human questions you've been holding on to because you didn't want to ask me, and you can ask Reed. Monday, June 22nd, the normal time, 8 p.m. I do have to say, by the way, Brent, we've got some live event tickets. A lot of people don't know about our live event because they don't get the newsletter. They don't read the newsletter. They don't listen in real time. Maybe they didn't hear the little announcement blurb we dropped in there this last week. But we have a live event. We're celebrating 10 years of the BEMA podcast. It's a long time.
10 years.
10 years. And we are going to celebrate in Boise with a live recording. We're going to have a live audience, and we're not just going to record an episode. We are going to have fun. We're going to have fun with the audience. We're going to give away some door prizes. We're going to play games. We're going to get some audience participation. We're going to have some self-deprecating humor. Because if you can't make fun of yourself, what are you even doing? So, so that's what we'll be up to. And there's still tickets. Like there's still lots of tickets. So people should buy those tickets because we're getting concerned at this point that there will be a live audience. So that would be a really weird live episode if we were like, coming to you live from Boise, and there's like 3 people like, can't do that.
We've got more than 3, but we don't have as many as we want. I have posted that link to YouTube and Facebook, which are the 2 platforms that allow me to post from our streaming software back to the service. I cannot post a link to the Instagram or to Twitter/X. So if you can't see the link, just go to the news page on the BEMA website, and you'll find the link there. July 30th.
July 30th. Links are out there. Doreen asked Brent, there's a shameless plug, looking for a roommate for the anniversary live episode.
Yeah.
Makes it a little cheaper if you can split the cost.
That's right. If you need somebody to help you make that happen. We've got, you can write in with the contact form on the BEMA website. We'll get you connected.
If anybody's been coming to these monthly live streams and they're like, I've never met Doreen, but she's always here before I am, now's your chance.
Yeah.
All right. With that, we got lots of questions as usual. Was L up last month? It was L last month.
It was L.
Let's read next month. So all the Marty parking lot has piled up, everyone. We're going to try to get live questions in there. We try to make sure that people that are around and live get to play. We just got a bunch of backup, and I checked a lot of questions this month, so not all of them made it in. And I felt like a lot of these were short, but I've said that before. Been there, done that. We know better. Here we go. First question comes from AJ. Marty mentions multiple times in the BEMA podcast doing the next right thing. Having recently started a 12-step program where that phrase is prevalent, I wondered if the use of the phrase of the podcast reflects experience with a 12-step program. It has been a neat connection for me. Thanks. Yeah, there's some discussion, AJ, about where that phrase bounces around within our team. Amber, she's the one that writes our companion episode, our companions for the reboot episodes. She says she thinks her mind got it from a Frozen, a song in Frozen. I believe I've been saying it for quite some time, and it's shown up in different ways. We have a catchphrase around Impact and Bema where we talk about doing the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. And it's supposed to be a catchphrase that keeps us from doing the wrong thing for efficiency or expediency or for efficacy. We always want to do the right thing the right way for the right reasons. And so the next right thing kind of ends up popping around that conversation quite a bit. I feel like I picked it up from one of my teachers. It's a phrase that I heard, but I will say, AJ, I have never participated on a regular basis with 12-step groups or programs. I have been around them a lot. And there's not many groups that I feel like I just have unadulterated respect for, except for recovery and 12-step groups. There are so many things that they understand that the church ought to be aware of. And so I have often learned from their materials. I've been close to people involved. I used to do these walks, these weekly walks with one of the local leaders of a bunch of 12-step programs. And so it may have greatly shaped. It may have gotten in there. One of my favorite books is Samson and the Pirate Monks by Nate Larkin. And it's basically a book about sex addiction and his finding his way out of sex addiction. And it's through 12-step. And he talks about his 12-step recovery programs from that. So it's a good possibility. I can't say yes definitively, but that it would not shock me if that were more true than I maybe even realized. So it's a good question. Kim says, I'm a part of a discussion group, and in reviewing Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection, the subject of whether Jesus descended to hell has come up. I'm not aware of anything in the text that says that, but just wondering if there is a podcast that addresses this. I'm currently in season 6 and don't remember one up to this point. We don't have an episode, Kim, that necessarily deals with that directly, but it does come from 2 Peter. There's a passage. I was going to bring that book down with me, and it's on another floor. It's up above me right now. But I just started kind of an older book. I think it's 1999. But it's Jesus the Seer by Ben Witherington III. And his whole preface, I'm not even sure why his whole preface talks about this. I'm sure it will make more sense later. But he has a whole preface that deals with this question. And basically, he ties the direct reference as 2 Peter. But there's also a reference in Jude that he says is related. There's also a reference in... maybe it's 1 Peter, 2 Peter, Jude. Anyway, there's a passage that Peter says Christ descended. Well, it says that Christ went and preached to the souls that were in prison. And Witherington's point in his preface is that this isn't talking about human souls that are locked in hell. This is most clearly a reference to Genesis 6, 1-4. And there's a whole Jewish midrash that there's a whole cosmology. And so Witherington says there's obviously what's relevant here is what the Jews understand about angelology, demonology, the heavens. And that was written before, I believe, Michael Heiser started doing so much of his work. I cannot remember when The Unseen Realm was published. But people like Heiser did so much work on angelology, demonology, all that kind of stuff. So it's in there. What Christian theologians are going to wrestle with is, what does it mean? What does that mean that Christ descended? And it's in the Apostles' Creed. So the Apostles' Creed talks about Jesus descending into hell. So that's not a crazy idea out of Christian left field. It's not a new modern. It's a pretty ancient idea. How literal, how mechanical are we supposed to engage that idea? It's a good question. Yeah, Brent just said Unseen Realm was published in 2015. So definitely after the Witherington book. So yeah, more work was done after Witherington wrote that. But it's a good question. It's in there. I couldn't speak, I don't have anything like really in depth that's going to blow your mind. Other than, no, it's there. It's kind of this thread that's just kind of trickling through Christian thought. And some people, I think, do too much with it. They make some big theological construct out of that. Some people kind of don't do enough with it. So it's somewhere in the middle there. But good luck wrestling with that. It's a good question. Chris said, I was listening to Marty's teaching on the different Jewish exegesis methods, Peshat, Remez, Drash, Sod. He makes a comment somewhere in that episode that part of the value of these methods is that they're to be done in a group where there can be discussion. And then at the very end, he mentioned that Sod was something that God or the Holy Spirit gave you. And it just made me think that coming from a charismatic background, I've watched a lot of people use the God card. And they come up with some really weird ideas. So I'm wondering if in Marty's idea of Jewish interpretive values, even Sod should be discussed in a group, even though it came from God. I think it's a great point, Chris. I've never necessarily teased it out or pulled it apart in that same way. But yes, I do. I think all of Pardes, I think we see this with Paul in the book of Galatians, where Paul says, I got my gospel directly from Jesus. And I don't necessarily know exactly what that means any more than the next person. But whatever Paul's saying, that's as good of a source as you could possibly get. And then a chapter later, Paul says, and I took that gospel to Peter and to James and to John, just to make sure that I had not been running my race in vain. Which, if you take him at his word, what that means is, if I had somehow gotten this wrong, I mean, I hear Paul saying, on some level, he got Sod. He got his gospel directly from Jesus. And on the other hand, I hear him saying, and I still hold that in accountability with the rest of Christian community. Because if they told me that that was not what Jesus taught, and then I would have been running my race in vain. But of course, they didn't say that. So I do. That's my long answer to say. I do think Sod, nobody ever gets to just sit in a vacuum and say, God told me blah, blah, blah. So, stick it. No, you don't get to do that. You always get to take all these things that we're hearing, that we're learning, that we're discerning, revelation on any level, and we hold that in accountability to scripture, to community, to all that stuff. So I do think that's, even though I wasn't saying that directly, I do think I would say that when I thought about it. Kat says, I know this isn't the type of thing you usually answer. It's maybe closer to something that would be covered on a YouTube channel video or something. But I thought I would ask, why are you a Christian? I really like this question, Kat. I really do. I'm half looking for an apologetic sort of answer, which I know you're not too keen on. Yeah, it's true. But I'm also half looking for testimony. I'm just curious, intellectually or personally, or whatever. Anything beyond, I grew up a Christian and I like it. Why are you a Christian? I would love answers from anyone on the team. I guess it's just funny that this, out of all things, is not covered on the podcast at all, as far as I'm aware. I'm not trying to have a sarcastic or condescending tone here at all either. I feel like this is coming across weirdly in writing, but it's not the place that is coming from whatsoever. It's just something that has been really on my mind and my heart lately, which I'm curious about as it has to do with you guys. I don't know anyone in my personal life to ask this question who has a Bema-y worldview. So I'm just curious of your answers. Thanks for helping. Cats, it's a great question. It's a really good question. A hard question. It's a hard question. And you're right. We don't talk about this on the podcast. And one of the reasons why is because if I tried to make this case at any point in the podcast, but definitely early, part of what we do is we're trying to pull out the manipulative faith journey that a lot of us were handed, where apologetics was kind of crammed down our throat or whatever. What I hope we do along the Bema journey is we make this whole thing sound compelling. It might not be that for you, but part of what I'm trying to do is trying to tell you why I believe this stuff without ever telling you this is why I believe this. Because once I do that, the weight of the conversation shifts because now I'm like, well, I'm on this side. Do you agree with me? And whether I say that directly or not, it shifts we want Bema to be this open-ended inquiry, this this little journey of discovery. I want you to come to your moment. I want you to be free to come to your moment at the time and the place and in the way that you want to come to it. So that's why we don't do it on the podcast directly. It feels sometimes manipulative, heavy-handed, and we want to keep Bema we want to put all the cards on the table and let you interact with the Bible, interact with the Jesus stuff, and let the Holy Spirit do whatever the Holy Spirit wants to do with you in your timing in the ways that matter to you. But for me to answer your question, why am I a Christian? So many reasons. Number one, this might be as close to an apologetic answer as you're going to get from me. I just have not, I don't know any other story that I've ever found this compelling. There's no other story in all of human history. There are other beautiful stories. I'm not saying this is the only good story and the rest of all the stories are trash. It's not at all what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is the only good story and all other faiths are trash. I've found beauty in all kinds of other things. I've just never found anything that touches what this story is trying to get at and what it claims about reality, about the human experience, about who God is. It's something completely unique I've never found anywhere else. So that's as close to an apology. I just have found nothing. At the end of the day, here's a couple other thoughts for you, Kat. If I'm wrong about this, then I still think it's the best way to live. Generosity, hospitality, loving my neighbor, loving my enemies, forgiveness. These are, I can't think of a better way to live. If I'm wrong, I'll go down being wrong because this is the best way to live. This is the best way to live, whether I'm right or not. It's just the best way to live, I believe. I've never found any other way that's more compelling. Selfishness? What, selfishness? Giving the bad guys what they deserve. Like, I know these things can be tantalizing in the moment, but as a larger redemptive story arc, I've never found anything like it. I've never found anything like it. And maybe another way to say it would be this: hope, resurrection, what we believe about light and darkness, life and death, what is most real and most true, why we would fight cancer, why we would give sacrificially, why would I love my enemy? Why? This is just the most compelling story I've ever found. I'm not talking about the history. This is why, see, oftentimes our Q&As are full of like, so did you believe Noah actually happened? Which is fine. That's fine. I didn't make it sound fine. I kind of mocked the person asking the question. Sorry. But oftentimes our Q&As are filled with that. I don't care whether Noah actually happened or like, I just don't care anymore. Because the story underneath the story of Noah is so much more compelling than whether a global flood happened 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, whatever. That historicity, and it's not that it's not true, that's no longer the conversation where I find life. That does not help me love my neighbor. It does not help me forgive my, some of us, we have to forgive our moms and forgive our dads. And there's a whole nother, and that's why the story is just so fascinating to me. It's so fascinating. And it's unlike anything else I've ever found. That's just me. I will wake up and give myself to this story because it's that compelling. I'll live this. I would live for this. I would die for this. I would give this to my kids to do the same thing. Not because of manipulation, but because what else would there be? Give me something else that would be more compelling, more beautiful, more redemptive. So good. That's what I think, Kat. Live question. New Bema listener, Scott. And with so many podcasts already recorded, I feel like I have to rush through or skip content. How would you advise new listeners to tackle the podcast content? We're trying to find new ways, Scott, to package this whole thing in the years to come. For now, what we have told people is if you're a binger, some people have like an hour and a half drive to and from work every day. Okay. That'd be an excellent way to do this. Some people get to listen while they work. Some people are just bingers. That's okay. But if you can binge, if that's your style, we recommend binging the whole thing, just blowing through the whole thing. And yes, you're racing through, you're not catching all the little details, but you are catching the big arc. You're catching the main movements. And then when you get caught up, you can always go, okay, what were the parts of the podcast that I found the most fascinating? And then you can go back and do a second go around or a slower, deeper dive. That's how we've always recommended it. We're trying to figure out if there are ways that we can redesign, repackage, and change the options that are at least available to you on the table, on your buffet of ways that you could do this. But that's what we've always said for now. Binge as much as you can, and then go back to the sections that piqued your interest. A lot of people like do this really slowly because they're trying to like take every little note and they're trying to not miss any details. And you can't go slow enough to do that. I've been doing this for 20 years. Every time I listen to Ray Vander Laan teach the same thing I've listened to literally 150 times, I still pick up brand new stuff. So you cannot go slow enough where you can do that. And B, they're just falling further and further and further behind. And we want them to join us. Like we want all of our listeners to join us on this larger journey that we've been on. So I know that you feel like you're missing a lot. I still think, Brent still thinks, I believe, that this is worth doing it that way. So just some thoughts. There's no right or wrong way though. So if you feel led or driven to do something differently, feel free, Scott. Mark says, our small group would like to study the minor prophets together. Would you be able to recommend a study resource? I almost put this in rapid fire responses, Mark. On some level, the quick answer is no, I don't necessarily have one. But along the way, we have recommended a handful of resources. And so I'll throw out a few of them. None of them are going to be like a comprehensive minor prophet study. But here are some sources I would consider. You have a book by Abraham Joshua Heschel titled The Prophets. It is a tome. It does not deal with all the minors, but the few prophets that it deals with and the larger stuff that he does with just prophecy in general is excellent. We quoted the book Out of Babylon about 40 million times in session 2 by Walter Brueggemann. It's not going to touch on, in fact, I think most of what it touches on is actually the major prophets, not the minor prophets. But another great resource is going to have at least a few minors in there. Robert Alter has a translation of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. And one of those volumes is going to be the prophets. And that it's not just a translation, it's also his footnotes and his commentary and everything else that you might dig into there. Finding yourself a great JPS study Bible, which is not a Christian Bible, it's a Jewish Bible. But if you can find yourself a JPS study Bible, it's kind of fun to just watch what's the Jewish conversation bubbling around about all this stuff. So those are just some ideas. And there's probably some other things we've recommended along the way, but that's those are the ones that come to mind immediately. We got a question or question/story from somebody who I'll keep nameless. And I'll even try to like gloss over some of the details because of the nature of what they're saying. I'm not even sure what my answer is going to be to what my response is going to be to this. Not answer. Answer is not the right word. This person says, "Hey, Marty, my name is such and such. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for all the work you guys do. You've opened my heart to the scriptures. He lives in another country, hopes that we don't mind him reaching out, but he was looking to see if you can instill some hope. I've been a Christian for 4 years, but before that, I was in and out of jail Struggled with meth addiction and various other drugs. I worry one day it's going to take my life. I'm a single dad of 2 kids. I work a full-time job. I feel isolated at the moment because I was doing so well and pushing into kids ministry and serving in the church. And unfortunately, it's reared its ugly head again. I love Jesus. And I seem to live my life in this in-between of doing good for people and my family and then getting drawn back into drug use and all the bad things that come with it. I know Jesus loves me. His grace is amazing, but I can't help sometimes getting confused as the people in church seem to think I can just stop. I fight it every day and it gets exhausting. And it's not as easy as just praying or denying myself. It has a very strong hold on me. I got baptized and I've grown so much with this. And I've had people tell me I'm going to hell if I can't stop, which terrifies me, but doesn't stop me. And I've had people tell me I don't believe in Jesus or I get my life in check before I talk about God. I'm just heartbroken and lost. You know what you think about, you have a very good understanding of the scriptures. So I wondered if you could please let me know what you think about this situation, if it's possible. I still have Jesus inside me, and he has enough grace and mercy. If this takes my life, you will understand that I wanted to stop and do love him. Any comfort would be amazing if you could share some wisdom. I don't know who else to reach out to. I think the people at church are sick of me struggling. Yeah. So many of our questions that we've already touched on kind of all weave together here. You've got recovery, you've got hope, and the story of resurrection, God's grace. Yeah. And I would just say there's so much about what you say that I find a lot of hope, larger hope for all of us, but also hope for you and what you say. The fact that you could say that you know that Jesus is still inside of you, that you know that his grace is real, that you know that Jesus loves you, that's a pretty good place to start. It sucks that God's people are known for coming alongside of those that struggle and speaking truth in a way. I'm sure that they feel like it's tough love. I'm sure that they think it's what Jesus wants them to do. But like throw people the fear of hell or, that you get the sense that the people at church are just sick of trying to help you in your struggle. Yeah, those things are real. The thing about the stories that we study in the scripture is that they're full of people that some of these stories are, I think we put a gloss on the Bible stories as like fantasy. There's some stories in the scripture, in the Torah, that are pretty crazy, pretty dysfunctional. There's some sin that some of these characters keep cycling back into. I think part of what I'm trying to say is you're far from alone in the biblical story. You're not some failure. In fact, if anything that we've learned through the biblical story is that you're the exact kind of person that God just loves to work with, because he loves to meet people in their mess and he loves to redeem people out of it. And it doesn't matter how many times you've stepped out of it and gotten on the right track only to follow back. Like he just loves to be like, all right, come on back. Let's do the right thing. Let's do the right thing again. And God will do the right thing with you 14 more times if he has to, 40 more times if he has to. He loves to redeem that stuff. He will love to redeem the next part of your story where you drag yourself out of this. And I say drag yourself. I mean, God helps. There's this our part and God's part and other people's part. And so there's a part that you play and there's this part that God plays. This whole redemption thing, this is exactly what faith is all about. Part of the reason why the very first question that I talked about, we talked about 12-step and recovery stuff. Part of what I love about the recovery movement and groups, 12-step groups, is they're done with all the BS. Like they just tell the honest, unadulterated truth because they have to. It's survival. It's how they're going to make it. And in church, we often we just don't tell in church, we don't tell the whole truth, not even close. Like we tell this glossy, kind of like made up, kind of like I'm a sinner and I struggle, but like Like, we don't actually tell the unvarnished truth, not like they do in a 12-step group. Part of what I love about your question and your story is I'm just getting to hear your own truth, your own unvarnished. This is the mess that you're in. So I would just say it's worth it. It's worth it to stay. It's worth it to stay. Stay for another day. If there's any moment where you're like wondering about, like, does the story end at my own hands? All those people that you know that are around you, even the ones that act like they're tired of you, but especially those kids that you talk about, being a single dad, they definitely care about you. So stick around, stay. It's worth it. It's worth it for so many reasons. But yeah, I would just tell you just to, what did we say in the earlier question? Do the next right thing. Just do the next right thing. What more can you do? Remember the stories that Jesus just kept telling. Like, there's a Pharisee who prays in the front of a synagogue, and he's like, thank you for all the things that I do right. I have my life all together. I have this beautiful, I've got righteousness and I've got faithfulness and I got all this stuff. And then there's a publican in the back of the room, and he beats his chest and he says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And Jesus goes, one of those people went home. One of those people went home justified before God. One of those people, God heard that prayer and went, that is an honest prayer. But yeah, there's some comments coming in too. And we're surrounded by this. We're surrounded by these people that have been sober, people that have found sobriety. And it sounds like you found sobriety too, in and out and relapse and failure. Just keep at it. Just keep it. Start over. Like, this is just what redemption looks like. It's not about the quantitative math at the end of the day. It's about the qualitative reality of where you live at any given moment. But yeah, somebody in the comments there, Terry, took me 10 years, but now I have 20 years living sober and sober-minded. Yeah. And I would recommend, if you've got the opportunity, question asker, to find a recovery group next to you, near you. There's a reason that those exist, and there's a reason why it's worked for decades. I'm not saying it's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing you need to do. It's just a checklist. I'm just saying, for so many people, that has been a support system that understands. They understand what it means to find sobriety, to find victory and triumph in a higher power in Jesus, whatever that looks like. And they also know what it is to fail, and they know what it is to relapse, and they know what it is to be honest. So I would just recommend that if you get the opportunity. All right, I'm going to keep moving. Don't want to. That question, I feel like we could take the next hour and a half. It's a good question. Thanks, question asker. Katie says, I would just finish listening to 119, The Gates of Hell. Great episode. They all are, really. So in my thinking for years, I have always thought that the Petros, or the foundational rock in this story, was divine revelation. Okay. That the church is going to be built on divine revelation to man, as Israel was in the Hebrew scriptures. I looked to find a remez, but only came up with Psalm 28. To you, O Lord, I call, my rock. Be not deaf to me, lest if you were silent to me, I become like those who will go down to the pit. Sort of linking rock to the voice of God. The other one was 2 Samuel 23. The God of Israel has spoken. The rock of Israel has said to me. I was wondering if you ever considered the context of what had just happened with Peter, as that Jesus was pointing to the gates of hell, would have been referring to divine revelation as the foundational rock. In the context of the events, it seems probable to me, but then it may be out of left field. I often am. It's quiet out there. I love that, Kitty. I love where your head's at. I have not thought about those, mainly because when I learned this lesson, I learned some of the rabbinical commentary around it. And it's tricky because we're usually reading this out of Matthew 16, Matthew being written in Greek, when at least some of us, myself included, believe that Matthew's probably written in Hebrew, which makes this a little bit tricky. The word that Jesus calls Peter is not rock, but rocky in essence. Petros, there's Petra, and then there's Petros. And Petros is used in the Septuagint in reference to Numbers, when Balaam is talking about the people of God rising. He sees them. Balaam looks out and he says, I see them on the rocky crags. And the rock, that's the word rocky. And so it's not that the rabbis are talking about Matthew, but that is what my teacher connected it to in terms of Remez. Not that he's right and you're wrong. You have taken, you've linked not just the idea of rock, but you found remezes that link rock to divine revelation or the voice of God. I think that's a very tantalizing idea. So I love that. And no matter how I feel about it, your head's in the right place. You're asking the right questions. You're thinking about the text using Jewish hermeneutics. And I love that. So good job. Question from Instagram. I preached today and told people to keep asking hard questions and learning. Good job, by the way. I'm a big fan of that. A 15-year-old asked me after an hour of questions, starting with, why would God create humanity? And he knew they would sin. I gave an answer around his life. And as a parent, I created 2 kids and knew they would mess up. But what are your thoughts? Yeah. God was not interested in creating. He wasn't trying to create like a thing that didn't fail. God was creating a dynamic creation because he wanted to do something with his love. In the Jewish mind, there's this thing called the Zimzum, where God is love and God is pure immanence. So God takes up all time and space and he's just pure love, but he wants to do something with this love. Like that love is meant to do something. That love needs to go somewhere. And so in Jewish mysticism, they talk about the Zimzum. God basically retracts himself. I always picture him breathing in. And he has to create a space where God is not, so that he can create something which is not him, because God is immanent and God is God. So he has to retract himself so that he can create a literal space to make creation. And then once creation is made, then he can he can breathe back out, and then he can fill creation. But he had to create this space where this thing that isn't him can live and move and breathe. And yeah, I love your thought that you had about you're going to relationships where you experience love most intimately and most clearly. So you're thinking about parents and children. You're thinking about your spouse. You're thinking about whatever it might be. And these are not relationships where, my relationship with my spouse, I don't want it to just be like everything works perfectly. The whole dynamic push and pull and victory and defeat and sadness and joy and this whole thing is what makes it what it is. It's what makes it beautiful. And life exists because of tension, because of, we can't know joy unless we know sadness. We can't appreciate triumph unless we've tasted defeat. We can't. And I know that so many of these things we would say are the result of the fall. And yeah, I think God said, yeah, I want, right now, my kids, it's like the hardest thing in the world to live out right now. And you already said this in your answer. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. And every time they get in a car and leave, do you know all the things in my head? I was literally driving home today, and there's from church today, I have to take the interstate, and there's a couple moments in the interstate where I was like, oh, and I'm 43 years old. I've been driving for a long time. So I understand what that was, but I'm like, man, that could have easily, and your mind just kind of goes oh, that could have been bad. And then I think about my daughter, or I think about my son, and I'm like, what would they have done in that moment? I did something because I've been driving for 20 some odd years. They do it. And my fear, when I think about all the things that could go wrong, when I think about all the things that, and yet, I know that I want them to live. I know that if I were to keep them from going into any of those places, I would not be doing them any favors. It would be this I want them to live. They got to go out and they got to They gotta experience. They gotta thrive. They gotta flourish. And I think somewhere in there is something similar. Somebody said in on Facebook, they said, I imagine it as a womb where he creates a space. That's exactly how the rabbis talk about it, Yelena. The rabbis talk about a womb. Absolutely. God creates in fact, this is where feminist and womanist theology does us a lot of favors, because they see this imagery quicker than male theologians do. But that's exactly how Jewish mysticism talks about it. He creates, what other person creates a space for something else to exist but the image of pregnancy? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. 100%. So there you go. I think you're in a great spot. Dan says John 13 just emphasizes that Jesus wrapped a towel around his waist and then washed his disciples' feet, but it highlights that he dried them with a towel that he had around his waist. I'm just curious what the Hebrew context is for that. Not necessarily Hebrew context. The image of somebody disrobing is what Jesus does. I don't mean that in a crude way. I just mean he has an outer, what's called this talit. He takes his talit off. So now he's wearing his haluk. And there's a big argument about whether or not the haluk, there's also an undergarment, like almost like a loincloth or a loin garment underneath that, or whether or not your haluk becomes that. When does he gird his loins with his, what does he do? There's a whole conversation about how that actually works, like literally in physical context. But the image is that's what a slave does. That's how a slave is in their context, in their world. That's how a slave is dressed. That's the work that the slave does. So you have this Philippians 2 image where even though he was God, he did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but emptied himself, took on the form of a servant, and became obedient to death. So Jesus is literally taking on, in that story, he's doing the Philippians 2 thing. He's taking on the form of a servant. I don't know if there's a whole lot of other context other than that, other than Jesus is becoming very unrabbinical. Like he's the rabbi, and he's becoming like the most unrabbi thing in the room, which I think is what upsets everyone because of how he does that. Oh, Paul says, most of my life people say that Judas was a bad person for turning Jesus in. Could it be that Judas was picked for that reason to follow Jesus? Judas was also the only one of the disciples that did not say he didn't know Jesus, but in fact pointed Jesus out. That's a good point. Never thought about that, Paul. Jesus also said to Judas, what you are about to do quickly. Could it be that if Judas took too long, Judas might not turn Jesus in, and Jesus would not fulfill why I was here? Maybe Judas was the only one that could do this. And when Jesus said to Pilate, you have no authority over me, except that was given to you from above. That's why the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. So would this say that no one killed Jesus, but this had to happen and had to happen this way and only by God? On one hand, theologically, there's so many things going on here, Paul. It's a great question. On one level, the theological truth that nobody killed Jesus is a good theological truth. Jesus says, nobody takes my life. I lay my life down on my own accord. So there's a theological reality to the last line, that last sentence that you said, that I think is yes. I don't know if I would make too much out of that in light of your other questioning, but there's a theological reality that I think is astute and important. And yes, all these things about Judas, I'm not sure that that's where I'm at, but we have an episode in session 3 where we talk about the betrayal and who betrays Jesus. And part of what we talk about in there is we talk about a source. Peter Rollins wrote a book, The Fidelity of Betrayal. It will not be people's favorite. They'll probably not like a lot of what he's pushing at or poking at in that book. But Peter Rollins, The Fidelity of Betrayal, basically he makes the case you're making almost exactly to a T, and saying that part of what it means to follow Jesus is to betray the very thing you think you understand about Jesus. And not that he's holding Judas up as a hero by any stretch, but also trying to say, like, there's this thing that Judas is doing that I think we ought to pay some attention to. I'm not sure I'm there. Well, I know I'm not there, but I'm also not like, that's crazy ludicrousness. I think maybe there's some of that going on, and I just have a hard time parsing out how it all works in any given moment in the story. But you're not crazy. Other people have thought this, and you're you're on relatively solid ground in your line of questioning there. I'm not saying that's where I'm at, but I don't think you're crazy at all, Paul. Bruce and Susan wrote a question. We're a couple, 78 and 79, respectively, with decades of varying forms of Christian expression behind us. But we've wonderfully found enlargement and textual freedom in your podcast. That's wonderful coming from a 78 and a 79-year-old. Susan is about halfway through, or excuse me, Bruce binged every season and every episode. See, who was asking about binging? One of our live question askers. Here's a 78, 79-year-old that are binging. Bam. Susan is about halfway through, racing towards the end. So what do we do now? We live in Marysville, California, a rural valley town full of conservative evangelical Christians and Christian nationalists. We cry alone in the wilderness. Got any suggestions for us? I believe I got a note from Brian that he was going to try to see if he could find any listeners in your area and try to get you connected. Because I love your impulse there, Bruce and Susan. You aren't just trying to listen to more podcasts. You're trying to figure out how to do this thing. To not just know, but to do, to not just learn, but to be. And you're wanting to do that not just on your own in a vacuum, which would be easy to do at 78 and 79. You are wanting to do this in relationship with other people somehow, somewhere. And I love that. I absolutely love that part of your question. I find that really, really refreshing. There's always more to learn. I mean, when it comes to like, well, we're all through with your catalog. What do we do now? Well, wait for every Thursday and Monday when we release the good stuff. But B, there's a billion other things you could listen to. We've tried all along the way to like send stuff out to you and be like, hey, does this scratch an itch? Does this smell good to you? Does this like, it's just so you can find things that you're like, that is my jam. I want more of that. Let me go. I just talked to somebody on book tour this week that was like, man, I was all caught up listening to Real Time. And then like a year ago, you recommended so-and-so and I started listening to them and I can't get enough. And I haven't listened to your podcast in like a year and a half. And I was like, that's kind of beautiful. It's kind of beautiful. Like I want them listening to our podcast, but that's kind of beautiful. That's wonderful. So there's always more stuff out there to learn from. But I love that the heart of your question is like, who we are and where we live and who's around us. Because if you can find the right people to do this with, we created things like the Baymal Liturgy. We were supposed to release a new version of that this spring and had to postpone that because Josh was one of the people that was working on that. And so Elle's going to put out the next version, but needed a little bit extra time. So we gave her an extra year to get that done. So that will be coming. But that's another way to do this. It's not so much about what you're learning, but it's about how you're embodying this and how you're fellowshipping with other people as you do it. In order to do that, you need some other people to meet and do the liturgy with. Yeah, keep looking because you'll be surprised at the seeds that God's planting that you didn't know were there. Couple years later, you find out that this other thing, this new church, this other little movement has been in your backyard for the last 5 or 6 years. You didn't even know about it, but now you've discovered it. So don't give up watching. Don't give up watching and looking and praying, because you'd be surprised at what shows up. God's doing a lot more than sometimes I think we give him credit for. So those are some thoughts, but I just love where you're at. I love where you're at. Don't give up. Keep looking, keep striving, keep chasing. Keep learning, do all the things. So there you go. Well, Brent, I'm not too far behind. It's 10 till. It's
10
that
minutes.
time.
Yep.
That was the perfect volume this time. Good work.
Let's see if you can do it.
All right, can I do rapid fire responses? Okay. I'm not very good at rapid fire responses. Here we go. I recently asked you a question. It's from Katie about the parable of the wheat and the tares. You graciously answered on your March Q&A. It actually produced more questions for me. I'm looking at it again. Does Jesus not say in the explanation in part 41 of in verse 41 of chapter 13, he will send his angels, servants, or whoever to gather out of his kingdom all the causes, sin, and all who do evil? So this is all in the kingdom of God, is it not? And not the world? So are these tares in the kingdom and the world is not really a part of the conversation? I think I use this parable, Katie, as an example of 2 and 3 part eschatology. So this is both. It's both the world and the kingdom coming together and experiencing this thing all at the same time. So it is the kingdom, but it is also exactly of the world. Facebook, Deb says, my question has to do with the center of the Bible. Can we even calculate such a thing with regard to chiasms? Is the Bible one literary work or 2 or 66? I've always been intrigued that taken as a whole, the overarching story begins in a garden and ends in a garden. That seems a bit chiastic to me. But how would one go about finding the center of the story? Yeah, it feels chiastic because it has a poetic ending that speaks to the beginning. I don't think you have a chiasm in the whole Bible because we have different canons. The Hebrew Bible is a different order, book order, than the Christian Bible. So right there, we have to figure out, like, what are you going to do with that? How does that work with chiasm? Some people might argue with me, and they might say that God worked in the midst of our canons anyway. Okay, maybe, but I don't. I don't believe that you have a chiasm spanning canons, and that's a bridge too far for me. Other people will disagree. I'd like to know what Brian thinks. Brian David, what does he think about that? We'll have to ask him. Raymond, I was just reading Asking Better Questions of the Bible. Great book. Thanks for reading it, Raymond. Also listening to the podcast, I was wondering why both places, when talking about Joshua destroying Jericho, Marty says there's no historical or archaeological evidence there was ever a city when there have been 3 major digs dating back to the 1930s and 2023 Tel El Es Sultan, which was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Raymond, I didn't say that. What I said was that there is no Jericho at the time in history where there's supposed to be a Jericho. So there's multiple Jerichos. There's actually 5 layers of Jericho at a very active and dig. A lot of discussion about that. And up till just a little while ago, last 10 to 15 years, scholarship had relative consensus. There was no Jericho for about a 700-year window, right over the time where there should have been a Jericho there. That's what I was referring to. Not no Jericho at all. No Jericho at that time in history where you need there to be. Now, in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been people that have brought that back up, and that is under discussion. There are some layers there that people are saying, I think this dates to the right period of history. And so there's some debate and some conversation about that. GTI just did a discussion about this. I cannot remember the title. It was one of the last few episodes, Brent. I don't know if you found it, but where they have a scholar on who thinks that the Jericho of the right time period does exist, and it's been misidentified historically. So there you go. There you go, Raymond. That's what I meant by that. Nathan, Marty, I'm listening to the Jacob Focused message you gave at Focus in Texas in January. I'm an alumnus of that organization, an avid listener to your work. Wanted to be there, couldn't swing it. I'm listening to the recordings now, and something stirred my heart about Jacob, Rebecca, and Rachel. I wanted to ask you about. You say that Jacob may be convinced that Rachel died because of his oath, and it's his fault that Rachel died. Could it be for similar reasons that Rebecca died? She said to Jacob, my son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me. So did Rebecca die because of that? And did Esau kill Rebecca in his anger towards Jacob? Thus his big surprising change of heart when they reunite. Because she never did send word. Rapid fire response, Nathan, it's absolutely possible. I don't know if I see the link. The link that I have for Jacob is the phrase that he uses. It is to my great sorrow, or because of my fault that she died. I'm missing that for the Rivka. However, if it's in there and I haven't found it yet, if that link is there, then it would explain why Jacob feels like that even more, because that would be his mom. So now his mom's story, he has relived it with his favorite wife. That would be bananas. I love where your head is at. Brent found the podcast. He thinks it is 116 of the GTI podcast. GTI is the agency that we use to lead our study tours. I'm not going to agree with every single episode that they put out on that podcast or the tone that they take when it comes to socio-political things. But just so there are some great conversations. That was one of my favorite ones of recent. So podcast 116 of the GTI podcast. Talks about the Jericho stuff. Shelby, why are so many references in apocalyptic literature to measuring the tabernacle temple? What is the significance in stating how long the spaces are? Some would say because it was God's house. It's like his favorite house. He made this house to dwell with his people. Have you ever, like, I don't know, Shelby, if you ever got married and you and your husband decided to go like build your first home, and you get to go to the hardware store and you get to pick out the faucets, and you're trying to like figure out, do I want the chrome or do I want the brushed silver, or do I want the nickel, or do I want the bronze? Like, which one do I, and like all those little details matter, and you have these fond memories. On some level, maybe that. On another level, maybe the allegorical numerical values of things. I doubt that. That's not where I go, but some streams of Judaism would say that. So I don't have a quick answer for you, but that there is an answer likely out there. The Jews would say, keep on digging, because there must be a reason. Not only is it in there once, it's in there twice. They go over all the instructions twice. One when God gives them the instruction, another time when they actually do it. They could have just said they did it exactly as God told them to, and they don't. They give the exact measurements again. It's crazy. In Bema Podcast 148, Marty strongly insinuates that he is a Torah-observant Jew, but everything I have read about him, including the information on this page, says he was not raised Jewish. Did Marty convert to Judaism? I'm ethnically Jewish, Laura. I don't put a bunch of my life out on the internet. It's always funny to hear people say, I've tried to find everything I could and read up all about him. That's a weird thing to experience about you. When other people are trying to read all about you and figure your life out online, which I get it. I understand why you would do that. It doesn't offend me. It's just weird. It's weird. It's weird to be a real human being and have people have opinions about your life in a way that feels weird. So yeah, I don't necessarily talk about it. I have ethnic Jewish heritage. My parents didn't raise me in that. They raised me in an evangelicalism that said, Jesus came, so why would you be Jewish? Judaism doesn't matter anymore. If you keep listening to the podcast, we'll explain why that's not the case, why that's not a good theological understanding of how things work. And we'll talk all about that. Season 4. But you got to get there. No hall passes. Season 4. Zachary says, is the book of Enoch necessary reading? Necessary? No. How's that for a rapid fire response? Not necessary. Is it good to read? I guess. Sure. I know I will spend the rest of my life reading the 66 books that are in the canon and have plenty to work on. So that's my take. Dwayne, this is episode 11. Here I am. So the remake helped me to understand Abraham's faith better. Good, Dwayne. The first time I listened to this, it left me and my wife, Denise, unsettled. However, more than this episode, I caught something that helped me see Abraham's faith. Prior to walking up the mountain, he told his servant, we will worship, and then we will come back to you. We, plural, Abraham told them, we will come back to you. That one word helped me to understand that Abraham believed God would provide. I thought I would share that with you. Dwayne, I love that. I've never thought about the we. I love that. I love that. It shows that Abraham has some kind of faith of what's going to happen at the end of the story before they even start heading up the mountain. I just, chef's kiss, Dwayne. That's fantastic. Rhonda. My name is Rhonda. We met at the MCC. Not sure if this message will get to you, but I just wanted to say thank you. I've devoured your first book. I've started the podcast. And I just want you to know I've been asking some version of this question for at least 10 years. What biases am I bringing to the Bible I don't even know about? What lens am I reading scripture through simply because I was born in America? And now I know this, but when I say no one has ever been able to help me answer that question, no one has been able to help me answer that question until now. Forever grateful. Rhonda, you're welcome. I put that comment in here because that's it. Like, that's what we try to teach ourselves, to become more and more comfortable with asking those questions. So thank you for your encouraging note and for doing it, because that's encouraging to us. So it's a great model. Alan says, I'm newish to the podcast, and I've been considering reaching out to start a discussion group. My hesitation so far is that some people with whom I've shared the podcast with are deeply concerned with mention of the Talmud. So I'm hoping to offer some clarity. It seems like Western Christianity specifically has given a lot of pushback to the Talmud. Some people use some pretty sketchy statements found in it to say that it's a corrupt resource. But considering how it's written, it's difficult to defend or deny its use. How should we view the Talmud? Should we consider not using it as a source at all? Is it simply a helpful tool in understanding Jewish thought and culture? More importantly, would you have any resources to help defend or refute the use of Talmud? Thank you for your time. God bless. Alan, thanks for the way you phrased your question. We got another question this month from a Laura, who was not very kind. She had some very mean things to say about Judaism. I didn't include that question in our parking lot here today. Very, very mean things to say about Judaism. Wow. But Alan, your question has a lot more just like openness and curiosity to it and respect. So I appreciate that. Let's see here. How should we view the Talmud? It's your second option. You say, is it simply a helpful tool in understanding Jewish thought and culture? I don't know if I would say simply, but it is that. It is a helpful tool in understanding Jewish thought and culture. If I understand what's in the Talmud, I can understand what the Jewish conversation was, at least immediately following Jesus. Scholars are going to argue about how relevant it should be to figuring out what it was like during Jesus. We're about a century apart, century or two, separated from the Mishnah is a part of the Talmud. That Mishnah, that's going to be right there. We're within a handful of generations of Jesus, not generations. We're within 2 generations of Jesus. So we're close. How relevant is it? We can argue and debate that, but that's what it's useful for. Is it canon? Absolutely not. Is it inspired? Not for me. Is it a helpful tool? Is it as helpful as any of these other commentaries I have sitting on my shelf? I think so. In fact, I would say it's more helpful. This is the church history commentary series right here, right? This is all the ancient church fathers, which I love. I have a deep respect for the ancient church fathers. The Talmud is at least as close as this green section of the library. It's closer than the red section of the library. So, and the Talmud's the Jewish conversation. These guys are philosophers. These guys are Greek. These guys are Western. And there's value in them. I'm not throwing them out. They sit right on my shelf. See them? I'm not throwing them out of my library. I have great respect for those guys. I also have respect for the Jewish conversation, because if I want to understand the Jewish conversation of Jesus and his apostles. Thanks, Alan. Good question. Reuben says, which books would you recommend for a deep dive into the life and stories of Elijah? Greetings from Germany. Reuben, I got nothing for you. Nothing for Elijah. Sorry. That's a rapid fire response. Aaron, I have been listening to the Bema Discipleship Podcast intermittently for several years. It has played a big role in me choosing to go to seminary. Woo-hoo! I am pursuing a career in academia, specifically regarding Hebrew scriptures. I was wondering if there are any areas of interest you have, big questions that are under-researched and you would like to see more people delve into. I'm thinking about areas for future research and have enjoyed specifically the literary elements of the Hebrew scriptures. I know this is a wide open question. It is, Aaron. I can appreciate the question. On one level, there's about 100 things that I've run into in my own studies and different things. I'd be like, oh, somebody could do grad work on that. Somebody could do grad work on that. Somebody could do grad work on that. Anything that rises to like the top of my consciousness, and I'm just like, man, I really want. No, not necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. I have some. If there's anything that does, it's gospel. Literary form analysis of gospels, like how are those scrolls put together, where did they come from? I just think the standard consensus way we talk about the gospels and how they were constructed is not good enough. If there's anything, it's that, but that's about as good of an answer as I got for you. Ryan said, just wanted to drop a line. You guys have been listening to the podcast for a few months now. I'm in Lexington, Virginia. I'm in the 3rd season, around episode 119. I've enjoyed this so much and have been greatly impacted by it. I have so many experiences and situations where I've reflected back on the podcast and the lessons I have learned about God that have helped me draw things in new ways. Just a few things. I'm an MDiv program at Liberty. My son spent 84 days in the hospital. Your podcast helped carry me through much of it. I have a new perspective on God. We now have a discussion group going on for a couple months now, and we are about 12 people. Might have to split to help the conversation along. I'd love to connect with you guys, but if you have anything that would help us as a group along, it would be greatly appreciated. It sounds to me like you got it, Ryan. I included this because I mean, you end by saying so grateful. Thank you, and you're welcome, and you're doing it. Like, I just wanted to say, like, I appreciated your encouraging words, and I wanted people to hear this because, like, you're doing it. You're living like life, which is full of your son being in the hospital for 84 days. You're going to seminary. I'm sure you've got a job. You're doing the education thing. You've also got a group. You're trying to figure out if you keep your group together or split your group. This is it. Like, this is it. I don't have answers for you or a right or a wrong way to do it. You're doing it, but you are doing it. And for all those people out there that also do it is awesome. Ruth, I have listened to over 300 of your episodes. I'm leading a group of elderly women through the New Testament. We have completed almost 100 of your episodes, and I'm wondering when you are coming to Canada. We would love to meet you and your team. My group is located just north of Toronto, about 45 minutes in Barrie. Our group would love to meet Marty and the team just to pick their brains. Ruth, I was just there. You missed me. I don't come to Canada often. I don't get out of the country. In fact, don't tell anybody. I'm not sure the team knows I left the country because I don't really do international stuff. I've been asked to go to Australia a bazillion times, New Zealand, other places, and my work I need to not get distracted, and I need to stay focused on the work that we do. We do domestic campus ministry, and I'm glad that our tools are a helpful resource for everyone. And I want to do whatever I can from here, but I need to do it in a way that's rooted to the work that we're called to. It doesn't mean that we'll be that way forever, but it's that way for now. So I don't leave the country often, but I was just there. You see my crooked finger? Do you see my crooked finger, Ruth? That happened when I was in Toronto, the end of February. That's when I was there. I was in Hamilton. You missed me. That's a bummer. Sorry, Ruth. Wendy said, did Paul not name Sarah by name when using the second women? Excuse me. Did Paul not name Sarah by name in Galatians when he used the two women as an allegory? Because the Greek woman of promise in Greek thought and Greek philosophy is epangelia, which is similar to euangelion. Or would he be speaking Hebrew? Well, he wouldn't be speaking Hebrew, Wendy, but you just like blew my mind open to something I didn't even know. I had to go look this up. I had to like figure out what you were talking about. Like epangelia and euangelion, that's brilliant. If that is what Paul's doing, that's really freaking cool. So there you go. Wendy, I don't know, but that's awesome. Deb says, last rapid fire response. I just watched a video about Shavuot. Never mind, get up here. And I was so struck by your statement. It's not just as easy as getting out of Egypt geographically. It's that you've got to find a new place to belong. I was wondering about this belonging to place and pleasantly surprised to learn that God had actually invited all the Israelites to the top of Sinai. Want to venture an imaginative picture of what it might have possibly looked like if they hadn't refused? What is our Mount Sinai in 2026? Christ. I love that. I love that thought, Deb. Yeah, you get this vision of like what new creation could look like. That's kind of what Shavuot is kind of beckoning in some of the rabbinical conversations, beckoning God's people towards. So, all right, that's good enough for now. Rapid fire responses. Play the music. Rapid fire responses.
Well, it only took 19 minutes. Honestly, considering how many questions covered, pretty good.
Pretty good clip. Some of those were more rapid fire than others.
When you were like, is the Book of Enoch necessary? And you're like, necessary? No. How's that for rapid fire? I was like, yeah, baby, let's go.
And then I added 2 more sentences.
Yeah, you know.
Couldn't help myself.
But here we are, our pause in the middle of our Q&A.
That's right. We do this every single month. We do a Q&A because it matters. I say that every single month too, because it's real. We pause every month, not just because it's time to pause, not just because blah, 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 not because it says on my document in bright red letters, time to whatever. We pause. We do that because people that give to our ministry financially make a huge difference. And it feels like a small price to pay once a month to take an opportunity like this to say thank you to any of you who do that. Like that seems like an easy, not a flippant, not a passing tip of the hat or whatever, like just what you guys do when you give to our ministry financially is very, very helpful. A lot of you listening are givers. Some of you small, monthly gifts, some of you larger monthly gifts, some of you annual gifts. Some of you aren't giving it all, which is totally okay. We want this whole thing to be a free resource. The study of Torah, the study of the Bible should be something that costs us nothing. And when you are at a place when that's what you want to give back to, you feel free. We try to make it easy. But for all of you that are already doing that, we're just really, really grateful. So, Brett, anything you would add to that?
Not yet. My section's
Not
coming
yet.
up.
Okay, hooray. We got some Scott says, nice hat. Scott gave me this hat right here.
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
my
Scott
Charlotte.
gave you the hat. I was
Yeah.
like, I happen to know Scott lives in the Charlotte area, so I could see why he would say that. But even better that he gave you the hat.
Scott took me to a baseball game, and
Is that there?
the Knights, baby.
Ooh,
So
very nice.
good work on the hat. Thanks, Scott. Wore that for
Well,
you.
why were you in Charlotte, Marty?
I was in Charlotte for book tour.
That segues perfectly into our next question.
Yeah. What does it say?
What can we expect from your book tour stops? Excited to see you in Kansas City, says this person on Instagram. I don't I don't know. This is like my EIBCB. What does EIBCB mean? What does HMABG mean? I don't know.
Absolutely. I don't know, but what can we expect? Here's what we do. We usually show up. People start walking through the doors about 6:30, unless the event is scheduled for 6:30. Usually we do a 7 to 8:30 event. People show up about 6:30. They start buying books. I start signing books. I shake hands. I meet some people. 7 o'clock we get started. I talk for about 20, 30 minutes about the book. And then we do like almost an hour of Q&A. I would rather talk about I would rather do this. What we're doing right now? Yeah, but in person. Like we're going to do it in person. We go back and forth. We talk about faith. We pull stuff apart. We might talk about the book. We might talk about other stuff entirely. And at the end of the night, we buy more books. We sign more books. I'm walking out of the door by 9 p.m. Like that's how the night usually goes. However, this person is in for a treat because if they're coming to Kansas City, they may get not just Marty Solomon. They might also get Reed Dent. It will be the one loop of the book tour where both authors will be present for Kansas City, Wichita, Oklahoma City, Springfield, St. Louis. Reed Dent's going to be with me. If they come to Kansas City, not only are they going to get Marty and Reed, they are potentially going to get Brian Trushinger. Who doesn't want to meet Brian Trushinger? You'll get his signature on your book. Not only might they come in with Reed Dent, Marty Solomon, and Brian Trushinger, but I've heard rumors that the illustrious Brent Billings might also be in the house. This may be the greatest convergence, except for the live event coming up in July.
Yeah, right. I was like,
That
don't
we've
talk
ever
it up
had.
too much. Yeah, no, I'm going to try to be there. And as Jana says in the comments, we've met Jana before. Woo, Kansas City. I don't think
Yeah.
I can say it the way she would actually say it if she was given a voice here, but woo, Kansas City. And I agree. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely. Cherry,
I'm
we
glad
did
you
in Israel.
interpreted that question though the way you did, because I saw that and I was like, where are you coming? And like, I hope it's going to be Kansas City. But
Yeah,
I think your interpretation of the question was correct.
absolutely.
But can you tell people, like, we have some yet to be published parts of the tour? Like, can we mention California and Texas?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
we can. So I head off tomorrow night for Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, Boston, Massachusetts. Then I head to Turkey for a city tour, and we got team leader conference. We're going to do a book event in Salt Lake while we're there. Then we're coming back home for a few days, and I go on what we're calling the Heartland tour. We're going to go to Iowa City. We're going to go to Omaha. We're going to go to Kansas City, Wichita, Oklahoma City, Springfield, Missouri, St. Louis. I'm going to head home. Then we're going to go to Idaho. I'm going to be up in Coeur d'Alene. I'm going to be in Moscow. I'm going to be in Boise. Then we have our live event in Boise. Then I go home. Then my daughter and I are going to fly to California. We're going to fly into Fresno and drive on down to Irvine. We're going to be in Irvine at the Cove, actually at Santa Ana at the Cove Church. We're going to be, I'm still trying to figure out whether or not I'm going to be in Santa Barbara, Redondo Beach, whether I'm going to be in Pepperdine. I'm trying to figure out if Pepperdine's got a room for me to do an event, because Pepperdine, who doesn't want to be in Malibu? Come on. If I got listeners in Malibu, I want to know about it. Okay. And then we're going to go from there. We're going to go to the Bay Area. Don't know where yet. Looking for a venue. Everybody in the Bay Area. And then from there, we're going to go to Sacramento. We're going to fly home. We're going to be home for a few days. I'm going to head to Texas. We're going to go to Texas. We're going to fly, and we're going to do Austin. We're going to do Belton, maybe. We're going to do some San Angelo. We're going to do Fort Worth. We're going to do Dallas. We're going to do 2 nights in Houston, because I got too many friends in Houston now. So we're going to do 2 nights in Houston. I'm going to come home. We're going to take a little bit of a break for Labor Day. We're going to head out to Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to be there in September. And that's as far out as my brain's going to go for now. There's more, but that's as far as I'm going to get today.
I cannot believe you just did that from memory. That was incredible.
Been working on it for months. Yeah. So there you are. Speaking of Israel trips, Terry says you're doing an Israel tour soon. We're supposed to go in October. We'll see if all the people playing politics and empire want to knock it off. We'll head on over there and try to study about empire. And yeah, that's why we head over there. We head over there to learn all about Israel, or not Israel. We head over there to learn all about empire in person, in real time, on site. And we're hoping. I don't know if we'll be back in 2028. Time will tell. But we're supposed to go in October, Terry. All those trips are full, so you have to stay tuned with the Bay Mom Messenger and the newsletter. All right, Brent, you got something here. With regard to Ruth from Canada's Question Above, what do you have in regard to Ruth?
Well, Terry made this completely unrelated comment, but said so many biases are being knocked down. And I think this was about some other question. But I will admit to Ruth and everyone else that I have the strongest international bias on the Bayma team by far. And so I am advocating for our international people all the time. Rest assured. Somebody on Instagram, Sal Rob something. I'm in New Zealand. Do you have any advice on starting a brand new Bayma group? Well, no bias needed for that one. We have the same advice. So if you want to write in with the contact page on the Bayma website, Brian Trushinger mentioned previously, we'll dump all of the resources we have about starting a group on you. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as you want it to be to start a group, and I would advise keeping it as simple as possible. But if you just need some ideas, some starting points or whatever, we got a ton of resources. But yes, I'm paying attention to you international listeners, and I'm thinking about you. When you're on the map and I'm going places, I try to meet you. So that's how it works.
Well, if there's any wisdom in me not traveling international, here's my story for you. I showed up in Toronto literally the night after the U.S. beat Canada for gold in hockey. And I don't know, Brent, do you think I was able to keep my mouth shut for 15 minutes? I don't even watch hockey.
I
don't
hope
even
not.
care.
Yeah, no.
Man,
that's what the Olympics is all about.
They care about hockey a lot in Canada. Did you know that? I mean, I knew that, but man, did I walk into, I just kicked that hornet's nest. Bam! It's horrible.
Perfect. All
right, back to the questions. Enough of that hockey talk. All right, everybody, what do we got here? We've got questions from Facebook. I'm really struggling with the Big C Church's embrace of Christian nationalism in this season. And I've considered leaving my Little C Church because I feel they're not condemning this idolatry and sometimes subtly supporting it. So I've stayed in it for years and tried to be patient, but I don't see other churches that aren't falling to this idol in my area in the Bible Belt either. And I'm wrestling with, I stay to try and be a good influence from inside the church walls, but I'm so weary. I've read Truth Over Tribe and some others you've recommended on the podcast, but I'm in such a place of discouragement. Yeah, Lauren. Yes, I don't even know. This is it. Like, you're right in the middle of it. There's no easy answer here. There's no easy response. It takes a lot of shrewdness. It takes a lot of wisdom. It takes a lot of discernment It takes a lot of knowing who you are and where you're at and what's needed in your situation, and being honest about the difference that you can make, the difference that you're allowed to make. Sometimes you're not allowed to make a big difference. So I don't know. But there's so much of this going on. I can tell you from book tour, there's like just so much of this going on everywhere, and it's very, very real. I know of a family I'm close with, and they've got these little kids, and a church that they've loved and been a part of for years and years and years. But over the last handful of years, it has become very much entrenched, and not in a subtle way, like in a very direct way. And they're like, we have to get our kids out of this. We have to get them out of this now. There's so many hard things about trying to discern that moment. And what's not demanded, what the moment is calling us to. How do you steward that moment? And it's, it is not easy. I am learning in my grad work. I went to study at Xavier University to learn from the Jesuits, because I'm trying to figure out what some of this wisdom is that's buried in the Ignatian spiritual tradition. And part of what Ignatian spirituality does is it's really, really good at discernment. It's just really good at discerning things. And there's a bunch of tools that they give you, but one of my favorite tools is there's like these 4 tools of election that Ignatius of Loyola talked about in the 1500s. And he said, there's 4 things that I would recommend when you're trying to discern something. I'd recommend doing 4 things. Number 1, he says, is Jesus telling you to do something? Is God telling you to do something? If God's telling you to do something, don't do the other 3. Just do that. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Just, if Jesus is telling you to do something, do that. That's step number 1. If Jesus isn't telling you to do something, move to step number 2. Step number 2 is just make a pros and cons list. What are the pros of leaving? What are the pros of staying? Sometimes that can actually, that sounds like such a dumb, like that's the deep Ignatian wisdom, is a pros and cons list. Yeah, sometimes you actually get a lot of insight in doing a pros and cons list. But I find the most beauty in the last 2. 3 and 4. Number 3, Ignatius says, if you're on your deathbed looking back on your life, what is the decision you will have wanted yourself to have made, and why? So if you imagine yourself, your future self, lying on your deathbed, thinking back to this moment that you're in right now, what will future you have wanted you to do, and why? Sometimes that brings us a ton of clarity. And number 4 is almost like it's like the same thing, but from a different angle. And so I kind of use it to check number 3, just to make sure I'm right. So number 4 is this: if it was if it's somebody you care about, your best friend, a child, a sibling, somebody, like, think of somebody you care about with all of your heart. You want the best for them, and they're in the same situation, asking you for advice. What would you tell them? And ideally, it probably aligns with number 3. If it doesn't align with number 3, you got to wrestle with why. Why is that alignment off? And usually it's because I don't hold myself to the same healthy standards I would hold my friend to. But anyways, wrestle with those. Those are 4 things that I've learned in my grad work that I just think are so great. Alex says, Marty and team, I need help with some Jesus math. I love Jesus math. It's the only math that I like. And this potential remez I found, I was reading 2 Kings 4. Someone brings Elisha 20 barley loaves and some sheaves of grain, and then is told to give it to the men. The servant says there's no way 20 loaves could satisfy 100 men, but Elisha says to do it, and they will have some left over. Very easily connected to the feeding of the 5,000 or 4,000. The math part is that if 20 loaves and some grain didn't seem like enough for 100 men, and these are barley loaves, Alex. So a barley loaf is it's like a little mini loaf. A barley loaf is a mini loaf. It's not like a bigger loaf of bread. It's like a small little, it's like one handful. It's like a palm-sized loaf. So if that's not enough to feed 100 men, then Jesus, every loaf would need to be shared between 5 men. And again, you've got a small palm-sized loaf. Then Jesus basically blows us out of the water feeds 5,000 with 5 loaves. What I found cool is that Jesus had 4 times less, but did 1,000 times more. Okay, now you are getting a little bit mathy for me, Alex. The number stood out as the same ratio from Exodus 34 you guys have mentioned. Alex, when I prepared this question, I did not catch that line. That is unbelievable. I love that. I'm just processing that now. I didn't catch it the first time. You guys have mentioned a lot, the 1,000 to 3 ratio. God will judge you to the 3rd or 4th generation, but blesses and loves to the 1,000th generation. Does this seem like too much of a stretch? Maybe just because I'm going to say maybe because it's just too juicy for the things that it's too connected to things that I've said for me to feel comfortable, but that's deliciously good. Interested to hear your thoughts. I don't know, but that is really fantastic. If I had somebody else make that connection, if some other scholar made that connection and not me, I would just be totally giddy. Because that is wild. I love that question. I don't know, Alex, but I love where your head's at. Oh geez. That's fantastic. Okay, Michael says, good morning. I just started listening to Bema podcast summer of 25. I've just completed session 140. I appreciate the teaching about the distinction between the schools of Hillel and Shammai. As I consider the differences between the two, I wonder how applicable these approaches are in our modern American Christianity. I can see similarities between School of Shammai with Christian nationalism, for instance. Has Marty given a lecture or episode on the influence of these two schools in our modern day orthodoxy and orthopraxy in America? Thank you. Not to that degree, Michael. I've never teased it out and said this is this and this is that because honestly, it would take too much hubris on my part to think I could draw those lines that clearly. I think I can see some things here and there, but I know that other people would see it differently. And so I don't know. What I have done is I have put that on the table because I absolutely think it's relevant. I absolutely think there are parallels. I absolutely think there are lines we could draw and similarities for sure. Do my biases and I see it a particular way, is that the way that it is? I don't know. I'm going to need the larger community. I'm going to need a group of us sitting around a Bible study to go, what do we think and what can we learn from this? And again, it's not going to be what is the line for sure. It's going to be what is the Spirit of God doing as we study this and think critically about the place to which we're called. It's not about 1 + 1 = 2. It's about, hey, I think sometimes I'm guilty of this. That's where the power lies, not in the hermeneutical objectivity of this proves X, Y, and Z, but just in the when I consider this does something to me. I think sometimes these application points are more dynamic than they are static. And I find some respite in that, to be honest. So, first of all, is there just let's not get poetic to begin with, Michael. Let's just stay let's stay right in the pocket here, okay? Shammai believed that you get God's favor by doing works of righteousness. That when God sees you doing works of righteousness, and so the goal is to do the things that God asked you to do. He was an obedience guy. Hillel was a faith guy. I believe in the promises of God guy. The things that I do are good. It makes God smile and it makes him happy, but that's not at all where the power lies. The power doesn't lie in my obedience. The power lies in my faith. Do those two realities directly, not being poetic, do those two worldviews still exist and reign today? Absolutely. And they reign on both sides of the ideological spectrum. They reign in the conservative world and they reign in the progressive world. There is a worldview that says if you do the right things, if you do it right, if you say it right, if you whatever right, then you're okay. And there's another worldview that says It's about something a little bit more substantive than that. It's about what's happening on a heart level, not just about what's happening on an action level. Yeah, that might not be the best way to parse that, but I think you get my point. Those things are for sure going on. Now we get a little bit more poetic with it. Well, does that show up like this, or does that show up like this? I'm going to let the Spirit of God wrestle with all of us in that. I definitely think there's things going on there. I'm far more interested in what the Holy Spirit does in us than what the exact objective, this equals this and this equals this. And I want to give it some room to breathe so that the Spirit of God can get into the middle of our conservative worldview, or the same Spirit of God can sneak into our progressive enclave and say like, hey, not that. Be more like Jesus. That's what I think. Instagram comment from Luke. Marty, we met 3 weeks ago in Raleigh. Oh, hope it was a good conversation, Luke. I enjoyed everybody I met in Raleigh. We talked about parenting. Very helpful. Thank you. Oh, I think I know who I'm talking to right now. I think I know who you are, Luke. Now I want to ask about processing grief from loss. Have lost 4 young friends to suicide in the last 2 years. Good grief. Goodness, Luke. We've lost 4 friends in 2 years. Jeepers. Yeah. I don't know. It feels like anything I would choose to say would feel so tinny and shallow and cliche. What we believe about humanity matters, because it will be a direct reflection of what we believe is true about us. What we believe about who God is and what's going on in the world matters, because it will be a direct reflection about how we see ourselves fitting into the larger scheme of things. Theology matters is part of what I'm trying to say. Theology matters. Relationships matter. Relationships matter. You showing up, I'm not talking about you showing up in your friend's life. So this isn't about what you and your friends, but when we show up in people's lives, I think we do far more than we ever imagine. Not when we show up to do the right thing or bring the right stuff or say just when we simply show up. I think people appreciate the fact that we see them. And I think that matters. And I think that I think the world is growing in such a way. I think younger and younger people, we don't know how to do relationships. We don't know how to relate well anymore. So many things the deck is stacked against us in technology and busyness and social media and like all this stuff and so we don't know how to show up. And so we're not showing up. We're settling for something that feels like it's safer, and it's a pseudo safety. It feels like it's more fulfilling, and it's not. It's like a facade of fulfillment, rather than showing up in spaces that, like, just being there matters. Theology matters. Relationships matter. Mental health matters. I don't know if we're just becoming more aware of mental health. I don't know if technology is having an impact on mental health. I don't know if diet has an impact on mental health. I'm trying to think of the ways that the world is changing in the last 50, 60 years. I don't know what's causing our experience to change. I don't think it's just awareness. I think it's beautiful that we're becoming more aware of these things. I don't think it's just the fact that we're more aware. Mental health matters. Going to therapy is a good decision. Being emotionally healthy and stable is a good thing, because what that enables me to do is it enables me to show up through the seasons that are going to be pretty dark. And there are seasons that are going to be dark, and we got to have people, and we got to have tools, and hopefully we will have God. I mean, it feels like the theology deck is stacked against us. Like, it's so hard to have good theology where I actually feel like God loves me. All this stuff, it all matters. It all matters. This small stuff matters, guys, is what I'm trying to say. It's not the big stuff. It's not the big, loud, oh, wow, that was such a cool thing, and that was such a splashy. It's like the smallest. What we think are the most insignificant things, for some people, are the things that matter absolutely the most. Yeah, I don't know. I know we have a theology problem. I know we have a loneliness epidemic. I know we have a mental health crisis, and all those things matter. Yeah. Yeah. So many things I could say. And I've rambled enough. So there you go, Luke. Now your questions are getting harder, Luke. So that's it. I'm cutting you off. Okay. We talked about parenting in person. Now you dropped that on me in the live stream. So you're not allowed to get any deeper than that, Luke. It's my warning. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Luke. Appreciate the conversations. Wish that wasn't your reality. Katie says, I'm reading Exodus chapter 32 about the golden calf. I have a couple questions. There are probably a lot of questions that come up in this chapter. But this one is about the law saying that there shall be no idols, has not been presented to the people yet. Also, it states that God is so angry that he wants to wipe the people off and start again with Moses. I just find that hard to accept. Is this being written from Moses' perspective? And God becomes a scapegoat? Any insights would be appreciated. Yeah, there's a lot of things that Jewish conversation, the Jewish commentary surrounding this story, Katie, is interesting. They say, if you notice in the 10 Commandments, the language shifts. It says, I am the Lord your God. You are to have no other gods before me. You are not to make any graven images. And then the language shifts from I am the Lord your God. The language now shifts to you are to observe the Lord's day. So it's no longer in the first person. The first 2 commandments are in the first person. Is that right? Am I saying that right? First person, like God saying, I am the Lord your God. But then the 3rd commandment and on, it's not I speaking to you, it's Moses speaking about God. So the rabbis say that the first 2 commandments were given by God to the people in person. And that's when the people in the book of Deuteronomy, it says the people come to Moses and they're like, we don't want to hear God talk to us. You go talk to God, because if we listen to God, we'll die. Which that passage in Deuteronomy seems to imply that they heard at least something. They heard at least the opening words. And the Jews say, well, look at the language of the 10 Commandments. They heard the first 2 and then they bailed. They heard the first 2 commandments and they're like, we're done. Moses, you go talk to him. No, that's not necessarily what happened necessarily. That's one Jewish commentary. And if that's the case, then they did have the commandment. And if they didn't have the commandment, we talk in season 4 about how the 10 commandments are not some unique Jewish commandment. They are what we call ethical commands. It's just ethics. It's just ethical law, which means there's no deep wisdom here. You don't have to be a Jew to understand it. And that would mean that God has an expectation that, like, yeah, no, you know better. I might not have given you the command, but this is not like a tricky, go learn the meaning of this. This is hey, you know better. This is spiritual adultery. Like, this is not rocket science. So that might be another way to look at it. There's probably a couple others. I don't think I would say that this is being written from Moses' perspective and he's throwing God. I think God has this. I think part of what God and Moses do together is God and Moses have this shared partnership where God's got some anger and Moses experiences that. He experiences the pathos of God. And he talks God off the ledge. That's probably not the most accurate way to talk about that. And then Moses goes down there. Now he's mad, and now God has to, like, they have this divine friendship of leadership. Like, I'm so angry. Don't do that. And then now Moses is so angry. God's like, no, it's okay. You were right. We shouldn't do it. So I think that's how I prefer to read it. But there are other ways to see it. So those are just a couple ideas, a couple options to throw at you. Michelle said, I'm curious if any Bema episodes after session 5 specifically address what to do when you're finding it hard to go back to church. She gives a little bit of her backstory. They have they both obtained. She's got a BA for Christian ministries. He's got an MDiv. They end up fighting each other, and as they found each other and grown together, their faiths have matured. We've learned more about the real Jewish context of the Bible, the God behind all of that. It's hard to find deep faith connections and conversations when so many are still stuck in the traditional dogma of the institutional church here in the United States. She's found some things to be helpful. Richard Rohr's latest book, The Tears of Things, was helpful. Just don't know where to start without jumping back in to swallow a theological world we no longer fit into. Totally get it, Michelle. As an organization that seems to specialize in the attention of a subject like this, I was hoping you might be able to point me in some resources or later Bema episodes where the host specifically discussed this, if you know of any. Like so many, Bema has been life-changing for us. I sincerely appreciate any help you can offer. Yeah, Michelle, I'm not sure we have any episodes that are necessarily about that specifically, but it's kind of in the water of so much of what we talk about. So I can't direct you to any one place in particular. And there's some things that might be adjacent. We do a 4 or 5 episode spiritual abuse miniseries in season 6. We talk about community. Like right now, this week's episode, real-time episode, was about community. We're going through a series right now in session 10 on the 4 pillars of Bema. Wherever we've talked about the 4 pillars of Bema, we kind of poke at and touch on some of these things. None of it directly. None of it's really going to answer the question you're really asking, but it's kind of in the middle of all of that. And part of the reason we don't talk about it is because we literally have people like all over the spectrum. We have people that are in church and love church. We have people that are in a great church and love a great church. We have people that are in a church that's probably not great and they don't know any better and they love it. And then we got people that are like, oh, I struggle, but I'm there, I'm good. We got people that are like in between. We got people that have left. We got people that really struggle with like hating the church. We've got people all over in our audience. And so to speak to any one part of the journey will feel like it's tugging on one group the wrong way. And it will feel like we're not saying enough for the other group. And it will only speak to, so we don't necessarily speak to it real directly, Michelle, but I will just say, like, this whole thing is built for this. Like, yes. For me, I've found that I've been able to find enough of a home in a church. The church for me no longer is the center of gravity for theology. The church for me is no longer the proof for my faith. The church for me is no longer the door through which I will find my salvation. But the church for me is the common gathering of the people of God. The church for me is a place where I can be held accountable. The church for me is a place where I can find a structure, a liturgical brace to lean against so that my faith can find some expression. Church has found a new place for me that I think is just as healthy. It's not more right or more wrong or less whatever. It just I have found that I can, like, I shuffled a couple things and church fit nicely in not another part of my life, but I just found that church was still helpful for me. I don't expect that that's what everybody else is going to find. I don't think that. The struggle is real and there's no easy answer to that, but it sounds like you're in a good place. Seth says, "Hey team, thanks for all you do. Just finished listening to the Community 4 Pillar episode." Okay, there's that episode I was just talking about. Michelle, boom. Seth's talking about it. Being in community with people that don't see everything the same way you do in the context of the church community, I struggle with how far someone can stray from orthodox belief before you draw the line and remove them from membership or treat them like an unbeliever. Seth goes on to ask a couple other things. Has a specific situation, a specific relationship in his life that matters to him. I'm trying not to give you the personal details of that. This person gave them a book that's written by someone at their church and publicized across multiple events. Hopefully it's not my book. The book is arguing for, different things: universalism, ultimate reconciliation. How do you approach the pillar of community, where you try to engage with people who love Jesus and who have different perspectives, but at the same time protect against false teaching that would lead someone away from Jesus? Should I view this person as doing a good thing and welcoming another perspective into their community, or should I caution them from attending a church that publicizes ideas that I believe are clearly unbiblical? Sorry for the long question. It's a good question, Seth. There's so many things that are so tricky here, right? Let me go up to the beginning. I struggle to know how far someone can stray from orthodox before you draw the line and remove them from membership or treat them like an unbeliever. I'm not sure there's anywhere in scripture that tells me remove somebody for straying from orthodoxy. Remove somebody for destructive behavior, like sleeping with their mother-in-law, 1 Corinthians 5. Yeah, that. Sexually abusing people. Yeah, that. There are some like behaviors that are super destructive. I'm not sure I see something where it's like, well, they got their dogma wrong, and so we remove them from fellowship. However, our churches often will have some layer of like, these are the things that we want to try to find some common ground on. So if you're way outside of this, or if you're not on this page, you're just going to struggle to find a bunch of resonance within this community. You're always going to feel like you're just, experiencing some pushback. That's also okay, I think, because you're not saying this is the only church that's saved. This is the only church that's going to heaven. Everybody else is going to hell. You're just saying like, this is who we're striving to be, and we're wanting to have some sense of clarity about what we're trying to do. I think there's a place for that. It sounds like this person is not a part of your church. So there's another body of believers out there who break the bread and drink the juice and swear allegiance to Jesus, and they apparently parse doctrine and dogma differently than sounds like you do. And I wouldn't worry about it, because that's what their fellowship is for. They have another fellowship in another place. Now, this person matters to you because you have this tight relationship with this person, and this person matters, right? But that's okay, because they're not like they're running after Jesus. Sounds like they might believe some things that you're not super excited about. I wouldn't. Maybe this goes back to the weeds and wheat thing. I'm not sure I would try to pull out those weeds. There's a YouTube video. There was an earlier question in the live stream that talked about this, but there's a video that I think is relevant. Brent, I'm sure, can find it. It was a part of our Kingdom series on YouTube. It was called "No Weeding Allowed." No weeding allowed. It's one of my favorite teachings I've ever done, especially on YouTube. And I would just give that I wouldn't worry about pulling those weeds, because it could be that one of us is wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe they're wrong. I don't know. But Jesus says, let me figure out the whole orthodoxy thing. Let me figure out the whole, because you may pull out weeds and think you're pulling out weeds, but you actually are pulling up wheat. And only I'm the one that can have that kind of perspective, God says. So let me deal with the weeds. You farm your field. And I think that's part of what I might say here is, I would recommend you farm your, like if this were in your own church, it becomes a little bit trickier, maybe. I don't know. And it's a part of the Big C church, but that's why we have different fellowships, right? That's why we go over here and try to do our faith this way, because we're trying to do it in a healthy way that's not causing division, and why you go over here with your group and you kind of do it this way. And again, you can do that in very divisive ways or self-righteous ways. You can think that you're the only group that's right and that they're going straight to hell. Like you can do that in all these funky ways. But there's a healthy expression of that too, where we're trying to say, I'm going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. We're both going to try to follow Jesus. I'm convinced this, and I'm not going to try to like make everybody get along here. We're just going to try to do this in ways that encourage us to flourish in all the right spiritual ways. So yeah. I'm not sure where the lines are. Like you have some questions here about at what point do you, and I'm sure that there are probably some lines that end up being relevant. I'm just not sure that I'm seeing a whole lot here. I'd be fine with it. I'd let it slide. And I would say the same thing if they wrote me a question about you. And believe it or not, I actually lean on one of your guys' sides. Like I land. I'm not going to tell you whether or not it's their side or your side, but I lean on a particular side. And I would not tell them anything different. If they were to write the same question to me about you, and they're like, well, they have like a really rigid Shammai, like it's kind of this really, but they're kind of over there. And I don't know if I should like confront them. I'd be like, no, they're over there. Like they're trying to do the Jesus thing to the best of their ability in Christian community, filled with the Spirit over there. Just let them do that over there. We're all going to do that together. And hopefully we can find some semblance of identity that rises above the particulars. Brian David said something. What did he say? Carmen Imes has a good book that might be helpful. Becoming God's Family. Why the Church Still Matters. That could probably be for both questions. Seth's question, also Michelle's question. I bet he really probably gave that for Michelle's question, but it's a good recommendation, Mr. David. Jennifer says, do you have any resources for young adults who are struggling with believing that God is real? My son grew up in a Bible-believing home and church in Columbus. Did all the things our church provides from preschool through college, but he experienced pressure and mishandling of the word, left fellowship, now does not believe there is a God. Struggles with why would God create humans to end up falling into sin in the first place? And then, is it just for God to sacrifice his own son when he never did anything wrong? He has read apologetic books written by well-respected theologians and is not addressing his questions. I think he is looking for a personal encounter and proof that others have a personal encounter with Jesus. He's also very analytical. So, for example, just stories of Muslims having dreams or visions of a Christian Jesus is hard for him to accept. He wants stats from a reliable source that would be more convincing. That's not what we really do, Jennifer. I don't have a big, long list. Like I have this whole shelf. Hold on. This whole shelf right here is full of like, well, it's hard for me to do this. There you go, right there. That's all full of my apologetic section of my library. I mean, yes, this sounds like he is the type of person, kid, young adult who does want and would benefit from some of those conversations. At the end of the day, it's not about that. It's about the resurrected Christ. And it sounds like in all of the things that he was raised with, he didn't have that ownership or possess that kind of faith or have that kind of encounter. It's not gonna be had by like, here's a bunch of analytical proofs. It might be enough to get people through the door. It might be enough to be like, okay. In the world of today's internet, apologetics just doesn't work the same way, because for every 10 things that you find that are proofs for the faith, you're going to find 100 more things that tell you exactly what you want to hear within 15 minutes on TikTok. So, I mean, it's just it's such a different world that we're living in today. And yes, it sounds like I just don't have good recommendations for you. It sounds like if somebody did, those would be helpful things for this young man. At the end of the day, what he needs is a group of people living out, a group of Christians living like Christians, a group of people just and not just one little small group of people. I mean, he needs Christians to show up in the world. And what does John say? No one's ever seen God, but if we love one another, God's love is made complete in us, and people do see God. Like that's what what we really need is people showing up and living their faith out. I'm not just talking about you, Jennifer. I'm talking about a whole world that he lives in. That's not making the resurrected Christ a real enough experience in his life. That's what we really need. I don't think he needs more books, or he needs people to show up in the right place in the right moment. And I know we get in these places where there are these people that we care about, and it's like if I can just find the right resource, then it will. And I mean, and it's not that isn't possible, but that's also not what we're doing. Like that's not what the early church was doing. That's not what the Apostle Paul was teaching the Philippian church to do. Like if you just can find the right, he's calling us to like embody the resurrected Jesus in the world in such a tangible way that it's impossible to look at and go, yeah, that's not real. It's not that he's not intellectually convinced that God is real. It's that apparently he hasn't experienced God being real, and that's supposed to happen in us. But I digress. Sounds like I'm ranting at you, Jennifer. I'm not ranting at you. You just have somebody you care about. But anyway, Todd. Goodness, I'm almost out of time. We're close to being done. Todd said, I'm sure my thought is not unique, but regarding episode 8 and the beginning of episode 9, the tie-up implies and even outright states that God chooses Abram based on Abram's meritorious acts of marrying Sarai. This is inconsistent with other scripture, Isaiah 64 and Romans 9 in particular, is it not? Todd, I'm assuming you probably just haven't gotten to, if you're only in episode 8 and 9, I understand where you're at. You just need to hang with us some more. Because there's just so much more we're going to unpack. You're assuming so much Christian systematic Protestant theology, and not that that's right, not that that's all wrong. We're not going to throw the whole thing out, but we're slowly. You're only 8 episodes in. If that's where you're at, you're only 8 episodes in. Like we're just slowly introducing you to like a whole new way of framing the conversation, and you're having it's a very typical. You're not crazy. You're having a very typical. Right now, you're learning something new, and you keep holding it against this like Protestant Reformation systematic theology. And eventually that's going to become so frustrating because it's not going to plug and play. And we'll get to Romans. I promise we'll get to Romans. Isaiah 64, probably don't need to be interpreting it that way. Romans 9, we're going to go through Romans every single verse. We'll go through every single verse of Romans. I promise. It's the only book that Christians seem to care about. I promise we'll go through every verse of Romans. That's just not quite what we're doing with. We're not talking about Abram going to heaven, right? So we're not talking about meritorious acts for salvation. We're not talking about Abraham being chosen for eternal security. We're just talking about Abraham being chosen for a missional covenantal relationship with God in an ancient world, right? And I know that we like assume heaven immediately. That's what we've been taught to do. But we're not talking about heaven. There's nothing in this story here is about like, where is Abram going to go when he dies? And he's going to go to heaven because he picked Sarai. Like that's like the furthest thing from what's happening in this story. But we have just been like so inundated with like God's choice has nothing to do with meritorious acts. And that's because God's choice is linked to salvation. And we're just like, there's so many things that we have connected together that the biblical story doesn't connect together. So we're not talking about salvation yet. We're not talking about God's choice being, we're just talking about why would God want to partner with him? And the Jews say there's a reason. And you might be like, well, the Jews are wrong because there are no reasons. Okay, that's fine. You'll probably be continually frustrated by this journey because I'm going to let the Jews talk about their own book. That's going to be one of the things that I'm going to like lead with is this is a Jewish book. I want to know what the Jews have seen. They got like 1,000-year head start on it before we ever got there. So I want to know what that looks like. So That's how I'm going to approach this. So just to kind of help you set your expectations there. That's probably part of what we'll find. I don't want that to be like heavy-handed or like mean. What you're describing and experiencing is a very common experience for people in this part of the journey. Just if it works for you, just hang in there. Just stick with it, because you're going to find out you're going to be able to frame and shape a whole different conversation. Oh, Johnny says, I get what Marty is saying. Tethering to the ancient wisdom. Honestly, I'm not even that uncomfortable with the whole castration thing. Oh, this is about the Noah's castration thing. That wouldn't be the weirdest or most uncomfortable part of scripture. Not even really close. But since Marty tells us to look for problems, what I didn't hear anywhere was that this in the podcast is the fact that it says when Noah knew what his youngest son had done. Johnny, I thought that we pointed out that Hebrew phrase is not the youngest son, like that, and it, even if you read it that way, even if you read it as youngest son, we still have to figure out who the youngest son is. We're assuming that it's a reference to Ham. It could be that he knew what Shem did. If Shem's the youngest son, he found out what Shem did, and then he got mad at, oh, I have a son that did the right thing. Now I'm mad about the son who did the wrong thing. There's so many ways to read that. Like, A, it doesn't read quite as cleanly, youngest son, as we make it, as you read it in the English. But B, even then, which son are we talking about? We're just assuming we know which son it is. You can read that with a lot. We'd read that a lot. Did he hear what Ham had did, or did he hear what Shem had did? Did he hear about the bad thing, or did he hear about the good thing? If translating it as youngest son is correct, either it was Yefet, who is clearly the good guy, or the youngest son in this case doesn't mean son, but rather grandson or youngest male descendant. Also an option, probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense here. What I'm really seeking an answer to is, how do we get to Ham being the youngest son? The list is always Shem, Ham, and Yefet. And in my understanding, that name lists are always oldest to youngest. Is the case that sometimes the youngest gets plugged into the middle of the name oldest? Seems like a genealogical order as always. Let's see here. I'm trying to summarize this. Obviously, Jacob and Esau, Ephraim, Manasseh would be exceptions as the older get. All of them, though, Johnny, all of them are exceptions. All of them. Abram's an exception. Every generation in Genesis is an exception. Abram's an exception. Esau's, Jacob's an exception. Isaac, and I got out of order. Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, they're all out of order. All of them are out. So you would have to assume that something, actually, you're having a problem with this. Once you catch the motif, you're like, wait a minute. Is this not the right order? Wait a minute. What about Cain and Abel? Like, you're actually wanting to chase the motif backwards. And somewhere in here you say, I don't think there's ever, the order never changes. Actually, the order absolutely changes. That's the point we make in the podcast episode. Is in the Table of Nations, in the very following chapter, the order is different. Well, which order is going to be the more official order? The genealogical Table of Nations or the narrative? You'd think it's the genealogical Table of Nations, but it doesn't match. And then when they come out of the ark, what's the order that they come out of the ark? Because you would expect them to come out of the ark in the order of birth order, but do they or don't? Actually, none of the orders match. You found a couple references and they're the same, but actually, if you look at all the references through these 3 or 4 chapters, they're not the same. They change all at every juncture of the narrative. So that's what I would say to that. If anyone can help me understand why Ham should be understood to be the youngest of the 3, that would be awesome. It would help clear up a lot of confusion for me. And I can't remember what our case was. I don't feel like our case was that Ham was the youngest. I thought our case was that Shem was the youngest, that he actually takes the role. He does the right thing. I'd have to go back and listen to what we actually said. I think some Jewish tradition definitely has Ham being the youngest, because some Jewish tradition says that Ham's not married because they have to make room for the person riding on the ark. We do that in season 6. If that makes no sense, we do that in season 6. So there's some things that we'd have to pull apart. I'd have to go back and listen. Johnny, I can't remember what exactly we said, but all the details that we're working with there are all scrambled. And I'm not going to prove to you, because that goes against what we're trying to teach us to do. We're trying to see the mess and go, wait, why is the author making this so messy? Why is the author not telling us, why are they confusing the details? Are they confusing the details, or are they doing this on purpose? That's what I want you to wrestle with. Not I'm right, you're wrong. Let me prove it. I'll show you. But like, the story's a convoluted mess. What do you do with that? Why is it so messy? That's what I want us to start wrestling with in the podcast. Taylor says, is it offensive for Christians to pronounce the holy name of God? Should we instead be saying Adonai or Hashem? Another question, not related. Does the law okay, let's see the first question. Is it offensive for Christians to pronounce Yod He Vav He? Should we instead be saying Adonai or Hashem? I know as a Jew in Jewish spaces, you would never pronounce the name of God. That matters to me. I wouldn't want to say it if I were in. I mean, once I kind of learned that, it just became really awkward for me to just run around flinging that name around. So I don't know. I'm not saying yes, that it's offensive for Christians to pronounce the name. I'm not saying yes, but I'm also saying it feels really weird to do it. Once you know how the Jewish people felt about the name of God and what it is, it feels really weird to just like run around saying it and, putting it on our tattoos and putting it on a t-shirt and putting it in our worship music. It feels weird to me. You may not feel that way. More power to you. I'm not going to hunt you down and be like, you're totally offending me. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't have it. To me, once I know, it's like, oh, that feels really weird. It feels like something I want to honor. That's just where I land. I don't know. There's other ways to see it. All right, last question. This is why I'm wearing the hat. This is Scott's question right here. I hope Scott is still listening. He must have made it home for the live stream. All right, Scott. As I wrestle with our being loved from the start, made in the image of God, how does this reconcile with the see in a mirror dimly, spoken of in the New Testament? Are we loved as a human being and becoming more Christ? Are we loved? That's our status. And we're becoming more Christ-like. That's a process. As a recovering sinner saved by grace, I want to be sure I embrace the good news of being human and understand the sanctification mindset. Yeah, I think you're starting in a pretty good place, Scott. The seen in a mirror dimly, I think that is, first of all, it's rooted in an image, I believe, coming out of Zechariah, talking about Moses' veiled face, because Moses didn't get to see a real clean, clear, crisp image of God. So there seems to be an image. And then I think Zechariah talks about the Gentiles having a veiled face. And so then in 1 Corinthians, there's a scholarly debate about whether or not Paul's riffing off of this idea of a veiled, seen in a glass dimly. That's just their burnished bronze. Their mirror technology was using burnished bronze. You couldn't get a clear, crisp image like we do in a mirror today. Their mirror technology wasn't as good. So you got this dim. So when you look in a mirror, and so people are like, is Paul playing with the same veiled image? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But Paul's point seems to be, no matter where we find ourselves on this side of eternity, we're never going to have the crisp, clear image. Everything we see is just not quite. It's a shadow. It's kind of a little blurry. It's a little out of focus. Like I'm seeing something that's real and accurate. I'm just not seeing it with crisp clarity. And there's coming a day where we will see everything with crisp clarity. Those two worlds overlapping that make the blurriness, that'll be done away with, and all we'll have is the world that God intended. I think that's the image there about the see in a mirror dimly. I don't think it's necessarily, I think that's what it's about. We live in a world where we don't get to see crisp, high definition. We're seeing a very pixelated reality. And now, as far as being loved, I don't mind what you said there. Are we loved as a human being? Is that our status? Yes, it is. Are we becoming more Christ-like? That's a process. Yes. Is that sanctification? I believe so. Yeah. Yeah, we're not becoming more loved. We're as loved as we could be. Nothing could impact our status of being loved. We are beloved. No matter how much we are sanctified, it never changes our belovedness. So we are beloved from top to bottom. We are as beloved as we could be. We are also being sanctified. We are being made more Christ-like. We're being made more into the image of who God wants us to be. But none of that changes our value or our belovedness before God. So status, I like what you said there. Actually, I'm going to steal that, Scott. Status, process. Our status is beloved. When I sign all my books on book tour, this second book, I'm signing at Romans 8:31-39. It's the famous passage about nothing could separate us from the love of God. Not height nor depth, nor angels nor demons, nor principalities or powers. Nothing could separate us from the love of God that we have in Christ Jesus. Like there's absolutely nothing we could do to make God love us anymore. There's nothing we could do to make God love us any less. Does that mean we have no sanctification to undergo? Absolutely not. So as we give ourselves to this love, because we are loved, nothing could change that. And as I surrender to this love, that love starts to go to work. That Holy Spirit starts to go to work and do a work in me and starts to change me. That's how powerful that love is. That's how powerful that status and that identity is it starts to transform me because of who I understand that I am. I'm a child of the King, and that changes me. But I was always a child of the King. I might not have realized it, but now I do. And now I start living like it. And I have a helper. I have a paraclete. I have that Holy Spirit that supernaturally helps that process. But yeah, I'm in it to win it. All right. Let's see here. We got to close this thing up. That was our last question. Thanks for the hat, Scott. Go Knights. Next Q&A is Monday, June 22nd with Reed Dent. He'll be here to answer all your Reedy questions. We got live event tickets for sale, Brent. Buy your live event. Come find us in Boise. Come be a part of the coolest live episode recording. I mean, I don't know if it'll be the coolest, but we're going to do our best.
I was like, hold on. I'm not ready to promise that.
We're going to do our best. It's going to be fun.
We are
Come
going to
to
do
Boise,
our best.
get a ticket, get a hotel room, drive down to Twin Falls, see Shoshone Falls, do something crazy that you never get to do otherwise, and then come be a part of our live event.
Yeah, don't be an idiot like I was when I went to Twin Falls and I just like went to the one bridge and had no idea Shoshone Falls was like, I missed it, Marty. I got to go back because I had no idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
do
I do
some
have
base jumping. Do whatever you got to do. What do you got? You got good news, Brent?
I got good news. You know, if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this Q&A is over, even though it's been over 2 hours, I need more, Marty and Brent. I just published episode 36. You know, it doesn't officially come out till tomorrow, but I was like, hey, I'm here. I got nothing better to do. So the reboot of episode 36 is out there in the world.
It's out there in the world early. You've heard it here first.
That's right.
Sunday night. Okay. I love it,
So
Brent.
we're
That's
done.
all I got.
We're
done.
out.
Thanks everybody for joining us. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun.
Catch y'all next month.